Alright, I think I am going to go ahead and drop the valves on this engine. What I've got here is I've just stuffed a piece of paper towel up in here to keep the valve in place while I compress the spring. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a wrench that is a 1/4 inch wrench that just so happens to fit right around the keeper and allows me to depress that while I grab these collets with a magnet. Looks like they're kind of gummed on there. So these are just, let me see if I can get it in the frame, very small, microscopic almost. Tapered C-clips that kind of hold that valve in place. And then you got the keeper that comes out in the spring. Now, in theory, this valve should just drop right out. And it does. So the valve is out, and you can see this does have a little bit of run time on it because you can see where the carbon buildup is. The seat. Area doesn't look too bad. I'm not going to do anything with the seat at all. In fact, about the only thing I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to drop this valve into CLR. And I'm going to let the CLR work on that. Work on that carbon a little bit while I take this other valve out. These little things are kind of, grab them with a magnet, because if you lose those little deals, and those things are incredibly hard to put back in place. This valve should drop right out too. This is an intake valve, and as you would expect, the intake valve doesn't look nearly as bad. In fact, just for giggles, I'm going to drop it into the CLR for a few minutes too. So that's how you take the valves out of the Enya engine. I'll try and get a video of how I put them back in, but these little collar things that go around, they're really tough to get back on, and there could be a lot of cussing and swearing, so I may not videotape that. Alright, seeing as how I've already just recently done a Enya 64 cycle rebuild, I don't know how relevant a lot of this is, but if you saw the earlier videos, you saw how bad a shape the outside of the engine was. Unfortunately, there's not going to be much way for me to get it to be looking much better than this. I just don't have a bead blaster or the means to really polish the outside of an engine. So this engine is going to look pretty rough on the outside, but I assure you from looking at the internal components, it's actually in really good shape. Here you saw the piston, and I was able to get the ring off, and I've got the ring so it rotates around freely in here now, and the piston doesn't look like it has any real wear on it at all. The gearbox was a little tough to get off. It was on there pretty good, but there was a lot of gunk in there, and I kind of cleaned this area up. I did actually take the Dremel and kind of try to polish his head up a little bit, so this, at least the one thing you will see, will look a little bit shinier. It's not perfect, but it looks better than it did. This front prop washer, I also kind of polished it up real quick. This thing I kind of did a little bit also. Not a whole lot, but just enough to kind of make it so it's a little more readable. As far as the crankshaft, what I did with this was I soaked it in CLR, and then I just really went on it with some quadruple aught steel wool, and then lubed it all up. I've got some new bearings for it. This timing shaft was pretty rusty, so these things sat in CLR for quite a while, and I've got them kind of rolling around in some oil now. Basically, I've got bearings on hand. The only thing I'm doing right now is I'm kind of letting the head soak a little bit, because it's still kind of visually dirty in the fin area, so I'm kind of letting it soak, but otherwise this engine is pretty much ready to go back together. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot of wear on this connecting rod, so I really don't think this was a low or a high runtime engine at all, which is kind of nice. So I mean, externally it's going to look kind of gross, but I mean, internally it's going to be a pretty darn sweet engine, and I think it'll run for many years. So we'll see what kind of price I can get for it if I choose to sell it. I may just keep it, but I've got one Enya 60 already. I don't really need two. But I really wish there was something more I could do with this crankcase to get that corrosion and buildup off there, but internally it doesn't look too bad. But we'll see how it goes. So I've just pressed my brand new bearings in. Put the C-clip back in, rear bearings in, ready to start disassembling. This thing, this crankshaft really just slides in here really nicely if I don't get it hung up on the front there. And it just comes in and out real easily. Now, as you can see, my butterfingers, all the oil on my hands. There's a nice set of bearings on there. So that part's ready to be put on here. Basically all I'm going to do now is kind of put a little bit of oil in my cylinder around my piston, and I've got my connecting rod marked front there. So I'm going to drop my piston in here. I'll push the ring in the groove in the rear first, and then I'm going to kind of go around front, kind of keep pushing it in until it just drops right down like that. Now what I want to do is I'm probably going to dry fit this without any sealer here just to get the timing set. So I've got my my timing gear and my connecting rod hole lined up there. I just want to kind of engage these two things, and I'll know they're totally engaged when this gap is gone. So right now I'm missing that, so let's try this again. Line it up here, drop those two things in place. Okay, so they're lined up now. A little bit of oil in there. You see it looks brand new. I am going to go ahead and put my 4 screws in here. I may try running it without a gasket or any gasket maker and see if it even bothers to leak there, and if it doesn't, then I'm just going to leave it. There's no top bottom orientation on an OSFS 90. There is. You can tell there's a definite spot that's supposed to be up and down, but on this Enya engine, this thing could go in either one of the 4 directions and it wouldn't matter. Alright, now that engine is ready to be timed. Now the mistake I made when making my last video was I thought that there was only one timing mark on this shaft, but in actuality there's 2, and I know it's probably going to be next to impossible to see those 2 timing marks, so I'm not even going to bother really, but there are 2 and not just 1. And those denote when your piston is at top dead center, which you can easily see with it like this. Got my gears here all lubed up. timing dot is going to point right to that timing mark there. And then this one here, to bring it up. Yeah, I'm off a tooth on this one here. There we go. Now this engine's properly timed. So next would be, already oiled up my bearing in here. My cam followers are in place. Again, I'm going to do this without any gaskets. These 4 long screws are the ones that go in the back. Put this plate on. So I'm going to run this engine like this without any gaskets at all, and then wipe it down real good before I run it, and then look for any indication that there's any leakage anywhere. If there was leakage back here, I'd be happy, because this is an area that usually doesn't get a whole lot of extra lubrication as it is. So that screw felt like I still had a little bit of garbage in that head that needs to be dug out. Alright, so this engine is timed. And that's as simple as that for timing it. So I'm going to put the rest of the engine together here real quick, or at least put the head on. I just threw these O-rings back in here. The cam followers are in place. The O-rings are here. So all we need to do is kind of stand these things up here. Set the head in place. I like to drop this one screw in the back end first. Kind of get it going. It'll kind of hold things together here. I'll drop these other 4 in place. I haven't even removed the old glow plug, the original glow plug that came in this engine yet. So I haven't dealt with that yet, but I kind of just want to put this thing together real quick and see if I'm going to have any kind of a compression issue. I have the exhaust manifold on here just because I was blowing in there, just to see if my exhaust valve had a leak at all, and it didn't. Oh God. Yeah, it feels like it's got a ton of compression.